Just about a mile away from Exploration Park here in the Katy area, Texas Hog Trappers says they've already caught over 120 hogs. Residents say have been troubling them for years.
Just 4 hours. That is all it takes for a feral hog sounder to wipe out $10,000 in corn crops. Down here in Texas, this is not just a nuisance, it is a full-blown war for survival. My name is Jake, and I have worked this land for over 2 decades. Traditional iron cages do not work anymore. These pigs are too smart. They smell the metal, bypass the tripwires, and breed faster than we can track them. One sow drops up to 10 piglets twice a year, making small-time traps completely useless. Look at this old gate-bent steel, completely empty. They literally laughed in our face. If you want to beat a wild predator on its own turf, you cannot rely on blind luck. You have to think like an engineer and execute like a hunter. Today, we are upgrading to a heavy-duty, smart-monitored system to take back our farm. Hit that subscribe button and stick around to see how we build this ultimate trap. Step 1 of taking back control starts right here in my workshop. If you are going to hold 300-pound wild beasts, you cannot rely on store-bought sheet metal. You need heavy iron, precision welds, and a design built to withstand raw, chaotic force. I started by backing an old, beat-up utility trailer onto the shop floor. The original frame was rusting out and way too flimsy for what we are about to put it through. I grabbed the oxyacetylene torch, dialed in a tight blue flame, and began slicing away the rotted crossbeams. Sparks showered the concrete as glowing hot steel gave way under the heat. To reinforce the chassis, I selected 2-inch square tubular steel with a 1/4-inch wall thickness. I clamped the new beams tight against the main frame, set my MIG welder to high heat, and pulled the trigger. The steady hum of the welder filled the shop, popping and sizzling as liquid steel fused the joints together into one solid piece of armor. I took a 3-pound sledgehammer and whacked the main welds with everything I had. Heavy metallic clangs echoed off the corrugated walls. Not a single crack. That chassis is now solid enough to haul a tank. Now comes the heart of this whole build, the custom gravity drop gate. Feral hogs are notorious for finding the weakest point in any structure. If a gate has even a fraction of an inch of give, a big boar will shove his snout underneath and pry it open through sheer brute force. My design eliminates that momentum entirely. I fabricated a vertical track using 2 heavy-duty angle iron posts welded directly to the front frame. The door itself is a solid grid of reinforced rebar framed by thick channel steel. The mechanism relies on pure gravity and a cable-released pin lock. The door slides freely inside the steel tracks, greased up so it falls without any friction. When the trigger pin is pulled, that heavy steel gate drops straight down at terrifying speed. I set up the trigger assembly, raised the door to the top of the rail, and yanked the manual test cable. The gate slammed down onto the steel baseboard with a deafening crash that shook the entire concrete floor. The mechanical locking latch snapped instantly over the top bar. I kicked the door as hard as I could from the inside, but it would not budge an inch. Once that gate drops, there is zero room for leverage and zero chance of escape. Building an indestructible cage is only half the battle. The real secret to trapping an entire sounder is controlling when that door falls. Old-school tripwire traps are useless because the first greedy pig walks in, hits the wire, drops the gate, and spooky warnings go off for the rest of the herd standing outside. To solve this, I retrofitted the trigger mechanism with a high-tech cellular control box paired with an HD infrared camera system. I mounted the weatherproof electronics enclosure onto the top beam of the trailer, well out of reach of any mud or tusks. Inside sits a 12-volt solenoid powered by a compact lithium battery connected to a cellular control module. The infrared camera mounts directly above the gate, giving me a crystal-clear, wide-angle view of the bait zone even in pitch-black darkness. The system connects directly to an app on my phone. When pigs show up, the motion sensor sends an instant alert to my screen with a live video feed. I can sit in my living room, watch 6 or 7 hogs file into the enclosure, wait until the whole sounder is busy eating, and tap a single button on my screen. The signal fires the solenoid, releases the cable pin, and drops the gate in a millisecond. No guessing, no prematurely spooked pigs, just maximum efficiency. To wrap up the build, I brought out a high-pressure spray gun loaded with a dark olive matte finish primer. Bright metallic surfaces reflect moonlight and scare off cautious older boars. Chemical smells from fresh paint can also drive them away for weeks. This industrial-grade primer coats the raw steel, seals every weld against Texas rust, and dries down to a flat, non-reflective finish that blends perfectly into the brush. By the time this coating cures, it loses all chemical odor and leaves behind a neutral, earthy smell. Where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments and let's explore together. Everything is locked, loaded, and welded to perfection. The trailer is sturdy. The gate falls like a guillotine, and the cellular trigger is ready for the field. Next, we head out to the tree line to set the bait and lay the trap. With the rig welded up and painted, the battle shifted to the open terrain. Setting a trap for feral hogs is not just about placing a piece of heavy equipment on the dirt. It is a game of high-stakes chess where you have to read the land, understand the wind, and exploit their daily habits. To outsmart these animals, you have to split your strategy between night and day operations, based on how they move across the property. During the night, hogs travel in large sounders along established game trails, pushing out from the thick cover of the pine woods toward the open cornfields. For nighttime placement, I positioned the rig right along the edge of the timberline in a deep patch of shade. I backed the trailer up against a natural rock ledge to block off one side, then threw fresh pine branches and brush over the steel roof to break up its hard outline. Daytime trapping requires a much stealthier approach. In the blazing Texas heat, hogs head straight for shady fruit orchards and muddy wallows along low-lying creek beds to cool down and scrape off parasites. When setting the trap near these wallows during the day, wind direction is everything. A wild hog has terrible eyesight, but its sense of smell is sharper than a bloodhound. I always position the entrance facing downwind, so my residual human scent blows away from the bedding area rather than right into their snouts. Location is only half the equation, because you still need a bait strategy that draws them all the way into the back of the steel cage. You cannot just dump a bucket of dry corn on the ground and expect a cautious matriarch sow to lead her entire family inside. I use a custom bait mixture that creates an irresistible scent trail across the property. I take whole kernel corn, mix it with yeast and a splash of cheap beer, and let it ferment in sealed black buckets under the Texas sun for 3 days. Once it ferments into a sweet, sour mash, I mix in thick black molasses so the mixture sticks heavily to the dirt. I deploy the bait using a strict 3-tier process. Tier 1 starts about 50 yards out along the game trail. I scatter tiny handfuls of dry corn thinly through the grass, just enough to get their noses to the ground and slow down their stride. Tier 2 is the lead-in trail. I lay a thin, continuous line of the sweet molasses corn starting from the trail, running directly over the drop threshold and through the front door of the trap. Tier 3 is the main jackpot inside the back of the cage. I pour a massive pile of the fermented sour corn all the way at the far end of the trailer, furthest from the drop gate. This step is critical. Hogs are aggressive eaters, and when the lead sow sees that giant pile in the back, she pushes all the way inside. The rest of the herd crowds in behind her, turning their backs to the gate as they put their heads down to feast. By 11 o'clock that night, the farm went pitch black, and the real waiting game began. I parked my truck on a high ridge nearly 2 miles away from the trap site, keeping the engine running low to keep the air conditioner humming against the muggy night air. Out here in the woods, the silence is thick, broken only by the endless chirping of cicadas and tree frogs ringing through the dark. I sat in the dark cabin, the bright glow of my phone screen illuminating my face as I stared at the live telemetry feed from the infrared camera. Every time a stray branch rustled or a shadow shifted on the screen, my pulse spiked. Modern trapping takes incredible patience. You sit there in the quiet, watching the clock tick by, knowing that a single wrong move or a premature button tap will ruin days of hard work and send the entire sounder scattering into the woods forever. Suddenly, my screen flickered. A movement alert popped up on the display, and the black and white infrared camera feed came alive with glowing white figures stepping out from the tree line. The night vision camera feed turned crystal clear as three massive shapes emerged, cautious and alert from the shadows of the pine trees. Leading the pack was a giant, hunchbacked sow with long yellow tusks curving out from her jaw. She circled the entry threshold for 15 agonizing minutes, her snout twitching violently as she tested the air for any sign of human presence. My heart pounded against my ribs in the dark truck cabin. Finally, the sweet smell of the fermented molasses proved too much to resist. She lowered her head and stepped over the door line, her heavy body followed closely by two massive boars crowding right behind her. They pushed deep into the back of the cage, heads down, greedily devouring the fermented corn pile. Every single pig was inside, their backs completely turned to the entry. This was the moment. I lined up my thumb over the glowing screen and tapped the trigger icon. Miles away in the dark woods, the solenoid snapped. The heavy steel dropgate crashed down like a guillotine, hitting the base plate with a thunderous boom that echoed through the trees. Instantly, the cage erupted into absolute chaos. The hogs exploded in panic, hurling their heavy bodies against the reinforced steel bars. But the mechanical latch held rock solid. We had them trapped. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, a thick blanket of morning mist was rising off the wet cornfield. I drove the truck out to the trap site to survey the catch and secure the heavy load. Walking up to that cage in the soft light was an adrenaline rush like no other. Inside, three massive beasts were thrashing in a frenzy. The lead boar must have weighed easily over 250 pounds. His bloodshot eyes stared right through me with raw, primal fury, white foam froth dripping from his snout as he repeatedly slammed his skull directly into the heavy iron frame. The sound was deafening. Metallic clanging echoed off the trees as those animals put every ounce of their muscle into breaking free. You could feel the sheer kinetic force vibrating through the damp earth beneath your boots. Every weld I had put together in the shop the night before was being tested to its absolute limit, but the structural steel held without bowing a single millimeter. Now came the hardest part of the job, hauling thousands of pounds of thrashing weight out of the wilderness and onto the main transport bed. I backed the truck up close and hooked the heavy-duty winch cable directly to the bottom frame of the steel cage. To minimize friction over the rough terrain and avoid ripping up the trailer floor, I slipped three heavy oak wooden rollers underneath the base of the rig. As the electric winch motor hummed and pulled the steel cable taut, the cage rolled smoothly up the incline ramps, using basic physics to conquer the massive weight. Just as the cage reached the midpoint of the trailer bed, disaster struck. The combined weight of the heavy steel enclosure and three frantic hogs concentrated entirely on the rear axle. The trailer wheels broke through the topsoil, sinking straight down into a hidden pocket of deep, swampy mud. The entire rig tilted dangerously to the left, wedging itself deep into the mire. The truck tires spun uselessly, throwing wet mud 30 feet into the air without gaining an inch of traction. Leaving a top-heavy load trapped at an angle in the mud with furious wild animals inside was a recipe for a rollover catastrophe. I needed heavy mechanical power, and fast. I hiked back to the barn, fired up my compact diesel bulldozer, and tracked it out to the mud hole. The heavy steel treads tore through the soft mud without slipping. I backed the dozer up to the front frame of the stuck trailer and wrapped a 2-inch thick grade 70 towing chain around the heavy bumper hitch. I set the dozer in low gear, eased onto the throttle, and let the massive torque of the diesel engine take over. The dozer tracks dug deep into the earth. The steel chain snapped dead straight with a high-pitched tension hum, and slowly, surely, the stuck trailer lifted out of the mud hole. The heavy rig rolled safely onto solid, dry ground without tipping over or putting anyone in harm's way. With the load level secured and strapped down tightly with heavy ratchets, the morning battle was finally won. Just as we thought we had the area under control, The monitoring feed from my furthest trap deep in the pine woods went completely dead. The cellular camera stopped transmitting right around 3 in the morning. Out here, a dead signal usually means one of two things: a dead battery or a massive animal taking its anger out on the equipment. I grabbed my gear, loaded up the truck, and headed out to check on the site in person. When I stepped off the truck and walked down the pine needle trail, the scene was unbelievable. The entire heavy steel trap had been shoved nearly 6 feet off its original footprint, dragged across the dirt like a toy. Sitting inside was a lone, monstrous, solitary boar. This beast was easily over 300 pounds, with a shoulder hump so thick it looked like body armor. His thick hide was caked in dried mud, and his massive, razor-sharp tusks had shattered the mounting bracket of the camera system. He was a force of nature, thrashing around with raw, muscle-bound energy. Down in this deep pocket of the forest, there was no trail wide enough to bring in the tractor or the bulldozer. I had no heavy machinery to do the heavy lifting for me. It was just me, a pair of steel bars, and a wild beast looking for any opportunity to gash me open. Handling a solitary boar this size manually requires ice-cold focus and absolute precision. One slip up on the slippery mud, and a tusk can easily sever a main artery. I grabbed my heavy-duty catch pole, fitted with a thick braided steel cable loop. Slipping that cable over a thrashing 300-pound boar inside a confined cage is a game of extreme patience. He kept tossing his head back, snapping at the steel pole with bone-crushing force. I waited for him to lunge forward, stayed light on my feet, and snapped the loop cleanly over his upper snout, cinching it tight behind his tusks. The moment the cable locked, I pulled leverage against the outer steel bar, pinning his massive head securely against the front panel. His body slammed wildly against the side walls, but with his mouth and head locked down, he lost all momentum. I deployed a second locking catch restraint over his rear leg, completely immobilizing his raw power. It was dangerous, sweaty work, but decades of experience teach you to move smoothly, calmly, and without a trace of hesitation or panic. With the heavy solitary boar safely restrained and secured for transport, one final threat remained on the property: the ghosts of the forest. Every farmer down here knows about the old alpha boars. These are the smart ones, the survivors that have been grazed by a bullet before, or watched a cage door drop years ago. They are smart enough to never step foot near a steel enclosure or touch fermented bait, no matter how hungry they get. They stay hidden in the thick brush during the day and creep out under the cover of pitch darkness to shred the cornfields from the edges. To take down these rogue operators, you have to go back to basic woodcraft and active tracking. I geared up at dusk, bringing along 2 trained trailing hounds and my semi-automatic rifle fitted with a high-resolution thermal optic scope. We moved out on foot, slipping through the damp pine forest in total silence. The dogs stayed low, their noses glued to the earth, tracking the heavy scent of wild hog musk lingering in the humid air. We covered nearly 2 miles of rugged terrain before the lead hound froze in his tracks, his tail stiff, pointing toward a dark thicket at the edge of the standing corn. I flipped on the thermal scope and raised the rifle to my shoulder. Through the lens, the dark woods transformed into a high-contrast heat map. There, standing right at the tree line, was a massive heat, signature the rogue old boar, standing motionless as he sniffed the wind for danger. He was cautious, ready to bolt into the dense brush at the slightest sound. I took a deep breath, steadied my elbows, and aligned the crosshairs right behind his shoulder, aiming for the vitals. I squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle shot shattered the quiet night air. The big boar dropped instantly where he stood, eliminating the smartest and most destructive threat to our harvest once and for all. Peace was finally restored to the crop fields. Transforming a destructive pest into clean, organic meat for your family is the ultimate full-circle moment. Land management is not about conquering nature with brute force. It is about adapting, applying practical engineering, and working alongside the land. When you respect the environment and solve problems with a clear strategy, you protect your hard work and earn your place on this soil. If this journey resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your own farm stories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Thank you for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all in the next video.